Begin with what is missing. No phone, no clock, no calendar, no weekend waiting at the end of the week, no end-of-month deadline, no appointment tomorrow morning, because even the word tomorrow belongs to a different kind of world here. You wake near the entrance of a cave or a rock shelter or some other place the group has used before. The air is cold. Someone beside you is still asleep, breathing slowly and evenly. Outside, dawn has begun to gather itself into grey. No alarm cuts through the dark. No notification lights up beside your hand. Only birds, wind, and somewhere farther off, the thin sound of moving water. The smell of yesterday's fire is still in the air, faint and ashy. Beneath your back, dry grass gives slightly under an animal hide. Your body is warm enough, but your face has cooled in the night. The stone around you has held the cold until morning. A day is beginning. What will you eat? Where will you go? What will your body know before your mind has time to name it? Most of us carry a ready-made image of this world. A figure wrapped in skins, half naked, always running from something or chasing it. Wild, anxious, a little dim. Hollywood spent decades building that picture. So did a lot of schoolbook illustrations. But the evidence we actually have, bones, tools, hearths, marks on cave walls, traces of meals, and cautious comparisons with contemporary foraging societies, points towards something more interesting, not easier, not romantic, but more complex. This person's day may have been more organised than we assume, more social in many ways, and shaped by a kind of attention that modern life rarely asks from us anymore. We have to be honest about the limits of what we know. These people did not leave diaries. They did not describe their mornings for us. Writing had not been invented yet, so we know them through what remained. A deer marked onto stone, a child's finger pressed into soft clay, a charred bone, shells found far from the coast, the shape of a blade, the blackened circle where a fire once burned. Every find is a fragment. Put enough fragments together and a pattern begins to show. Not a perfect portrait. More like a figure emerging through mist. Science revises this story all the time. It should. The past is not a fixed painting on a wall. It is a reconstruction, corrected whenever new evidence arrives. Still, some shapes are clear enough to challenge the story modern life tells about itself. Because civilization did not only change where people lived, it changed the rhythm of being human. In this video we will follow one day inside that older rhythm. Morning to night, an ordinary day for an ordinary person somewhere roughly 30,000 years ago. We do not need to decide whether this person is a man or a woman. They are a point of view, a witness, a way for us to look without pretending we can fully enter. We will not turn them into a cartoon. We will not make them noble, simple, brutal, or pure. We will try to understand. If this journey keeps you company, you can leave a quiet note below, where in the world you're listening from, or simply that you are here. A like can do the same thing. A small mark in the dark. I listened. Now the day begins. Light comes first. Not sound, not urgency. Just a slow grey opening along the eastern edge of the world. It is not like a switch being flipped. Not like a curtain pulled back. Dawn arrives by degrees. One star loses its edge, then another. A pale line forms at the horizon and widens too slowly to catch in a single glance. Stay with it long enough, though, and you can see the world changing. The person in the shelter is not jolted awake. Nothing vibrates against the ground. Nothing rings. The body rises toward waking the way bodies have risen for most of human time. Gradually, unevenly, in conversation with light, cold, sound, and the people nearby. Compare that with a modern morning. For many of us, waking begins as an interruption, a phone tone, a lit screen, the blunt arithmetic of a clock. The body is still somewhere inside sleep, while the mind has already started making lists. What do I have to do today? What did I forget? What time is the first meeting? That kind of morning is new. Not new by our standards, maybe, but new by the standards of the species. For most of human existence, the body did not wake because a device demanded it. It woke because the world around it changed. This person does not spring out of bed. There is no bed to spring from. Under them is a worked-together layer of grass, hide and ground. Around them are other bodies, close enough to share warmth. Above them is a thin pocket of heat made from breath, smoke, and the last warmth of the fire. Outside, another clock is running. Birds begin it. One species starts before the others. A second joins, then another. In some landscapes, the chorus begins well before the sun itself appears. A person who has heard that sequence since childhood does not need to translate it into numbers. The order of sounds already tells them something about the hour, the weather, the season, and whether the morning is ordinary. They do not think, "It is 5:40. They listen. Listening is timekeeping. One of the first to stir may be an elder. That is not hard to imagine. Older bodies often sleep more lightly. A sore back, a cold draught, a small ache in the hip. Any of these can bring someone closer to waking. But in a camp like this, light sleep can become useful. An elder waking early may check the fire, listen to the morning, notice whether anything in the night has changed. In a modern phrase, they are part of the camp's early warning system. But nothing about this alarm is loud. It does not startle anyone. It simply opens an ear. The elder moves toward the hearth. Coals remain under the ash. A few thin sticks are added. A soft crackle rises. To the rest of the camp, that sound is enough. Morning is beginning. There is no rush. But the day is no longer asleep. This is where the old stereotype begins to weaken. We often imagine prehistoric people as if their lives were nothing but panic, always running, always starving, always one mistake away from collapse. Danger was real, hunger was real, injury could change everything. But constant panic is not a good survival strategy. No animal, including a human animal, can live well in permanent alarm. Studies of contemporary foraging communities are not direct windows into the Paleolithic. They are living societies with their own histories. But they do offer clues about human possibilities outside industrial time. And one clue is important. The pace of life does not have to begin with acceleration. A morning can start slowly and still be organized. Someone stretches. Someone turns over. A child lifts a head, then drops it again. For a few minutes, bodies test the day before entering it fully. That is not laziness. It is bodily sense. Cold air asks for a gradual transition. Heart rate, circulation, body temperature, alertness, all of these adjust. The body does not become awake in a single command. Most of us know a small version of this on the rare morning when we wake before the alarm. There is a different texture to it. The mind arrives in pieces. You hear the room before you name it. You notice the light before the day has a plan. Then the phone sounds, and the older kind of waking disappears. Sleep science gives us some language for this. Cortisol usually rises around waking and helps prepare the body for the day, but that process is part of a broader circadian rhythm, not a simple switch. A loud alarm does not neatly break the body in one clean mechanism. Still, many people recognize the difference between being pulled up gradually and being forced upward at once. The important point is simpler than the chemistry. For this person, morning is not a shock, it is an emergence. Their night may not have been sealed off from the world in the way ours often is. We should be careful here. It would be too strong to say that all prehistoric people slept in two perfect phases, or that the human body is built for one universal sleep pattern. Historical records from later pre-industrial societies describe nights with periods of waking. Some modern studies of small-scale societies show sleep that is more consolidated than the old segmented sleep story would suggest. Human sleep has always varied with light, temperature, safety, season, children, age, and work. But it is reasonable to imagine that a night in this camp was more porous than a night in a modern bedroom. Someone woke to tend the fire, someone shifted closer to a child, someone listened when a sound crossed the dark, someone slept deeply while someone else hovered nearer the surface, so dawn did not arrive after an absolute shutdown, it came after a night of layers, deep sleep, light sleep, dreaming, listening. Morning rose through all of it. This person turns onto one side and pushes up on an elbow. They take in the space, the bodies nearby, the smell of smoke, the child still sleeping, the shape of the entrance now grey at the edge. Then they stand. Cold air touches their face. Breath appears for a moment, pale in the early light. They walk toward the shelter's opening and step outside. For a second, the eyes narrow. Then the morning is read. Not looked at. Read. Are there new tracks in the ground? Which way has the wind turned? Are the distant birds calm, or has something disturbed them? Are the clouds building in a way that matters? Has anything moved near the water during the night? A modern hiker standing in the same place might see a nice morning, maybe a little cold, maybe rain later. That would be enough for us, because usually that is all the morning requires from us. For this person, every element carries information. Flattened grass may mean an animal passed through. A sudden bird call may point toward movement in the brush. A shift in dampness may tell something about the hours ahead. None of this has to become a sentence in the mind. Much of it is simply absorbed. The morning informs the body before the body explains it. There's nothing crude about this perception. It is fine-grained, practiced, and practical. When the person returns to the camp, others are beginning to stir. A child murmurs. Someone pulls a hide closer. Someone coughs once and settles again. No one announces the day. No one needs to. The first requirements are modest and enormous at the same time. Everyone survived the night. The bodies are warm. The fire is still alive. If those three things are true, the day has begun well. Everything else can follow. The movement of the camp comes from the body, from hunger, from conversation, from the pull of tasks that will soon become obvious. It may look inefficient from the outside, but it has its own calibration. People are not yet doing things simply because a schedule told them to. They are waiting for the world and the group to reveal what needs doing. Before any formal work begins, the day has already started on its own. As the light strengthens, attention begins to gather toward one point in the camp. You can hear it before you look at it. You can smell it before you reach it. A little warmth meets the skin a few steps away. Beneath the birds and the low voices, a soft crackle keeps its place. The morning has a centre, the fire. The fire is easy to underestimate now. In modern life it hides, under stoves, inside furnaces, in engines, in the brief flare of a match. We use fire constantly, but most of the time we do not see it. For this person, fire is visible, central, and alive, not only a tool, a place. Imagine the group in a cold valley under stone wrapped in hides. They may have tools, weapons, dried food, knowledge of the land, but without fire everything changes. Food stays harder to digest. The cold pushes in. The dark comes closer. Animals that prefer distance may test the edge. Fire alters the terms of life. It gives heat. It changes food. It pushes darkness back. It creates a ring where faces can be seen. And that last part matters more than it may sound. A flame makes a centre. Around that centre, people sit. They see one another. They talk. They eat. They repair things. They pass information without calling it information. Some anthropologists have argued that firelit hours matter deeply for human social life. Polly Wiesner's work with Jew/Huanzi communities, for example, shows a striking difference between daytime talk and nighttime talk. Practical matters by day, stories, memory, imagination, and social repair around evening fires. We cannot simply project one community into 30,000 years ago. But the clue is powerful. Fire did more than warm hands. It made time after dark usable. In the early morning, our person comes close to the hearth. Someone has probably already coaxed the coals back to life. This takes skill, but not drama. A small movement of ash, a few dry twigs, a careful breath. Starting a fire from nothing can be hard. Depending on the materials and method, it can take patience, experience, and luck. That is why a camp does not casually let the fire die. The goal is continuity. A live coal is easier than a new flame. A maintained fire is easier than a rescued morning. So firekeeping becomes a kind of quiet responsibility. It may not belong to one person forever. It may pass from hand to hand, from evening to night to dawn. But someone notices. Someone always notices. If the fire goes out completely, the day begins differently. Maybe rain entered the shelter. Maybe a gust scattered the ash. Maybe the coals were weaker than they looked. The first person kneels down, blows gently, waits for the red to answer. Nothing. Again, nothing. Now the group has a problem. They can try to make fire from friction or sparks, depending on the tools and place. They can search for something still alive in the ash. If another camp is near, and relations are good, someone might go for an ember. That possibility tells us something. Fire is not only warmth, it is relationship. A group able to ask another group for coals is not alone in the landscape. They share language, memory, obligation, or at least recognition. A coal can be a social bridge. Most of us have a modern version of this, though it is hidden inside walls. A home survives through quiet maintenance, heating systems, pipes in winter, repairs, bills, the small attentions that keep a place livable. Nobody celebrates them until they fail. The older version was red under ash. At this hour the fire sounds small, a crackle, a soft pop, an ember shifting. 3 or 4 people are gathered now. Someone has water in a bark or skin container, brought from a nearby spring or stream. If this group needs to warm it, they may use heated stones rather than a pot set over the flames. Stones are placed in the fire, then moved carefully into the liquid. Steam begins slowly. This is a technology, though it does not look like one to us. Before pottery was widespread, heating liquids required this kind of inventiveness. The oldest known ceramic vessels appear much later than the 30,000-year scene we're following, and they emerge in particular regions, not everywhere at once. In this camp, pottery is probably absent as an everyday tool, so there are hot stones, embers, ash, bark, hide, wood, and practiced hands. Food is handled close to the coals, strips of yesterday's meat tough but nourishing, a root left near the ash, a handful of nuts, maybe berries dried from an earlier season. Nothing about this is arranged as a modern breakfast. Nobody has assigned morning duties yet. They form through conversation. Someone says the fruit in the northern thicket may be ready. Someone mentions tracks seen near the water. Someone else needs to repair a child's foot wrapping. A plan begins to appear, not on a page, not in a calendar, but in the shared space between voices. By the time people stand up and move away from the fire, much of the day has already been agreed upon. No meeting has happened. No list has been written. The camp knows. That too is a form of memory. Before writing, knowledge had to live in people, in voices, in roots, in hands, in repeated actions, family relations, animal behaviour, the location of water, which plants mattered, which stones cut well, which valley was generous after rain, which person was generous under pressure. None of this was stored separately from life. A child near the fire hears a warning without being formally taught. A place name is spoken. A story about a dry season comes up. A tool is passed from one hand to another. The brain records more than anyone announces. This is not school. It is education in an older form. Fire makes that possible because it slows the group enough to gather. Without it, people are cold, scattered, moving. With it, they have a centre, a reason to remain near one another, a place where small knowledge can pass almost invisibly. There are fewer visible fires in modern homes. In many rooms, the centre is now a screen. A screen also gives light. It also draws attention. But the pattern is different. Fire tends to gather faces toward one another. A screen often gathers each person inward, toward a private stream. That does not make the screen evil. It is one of the great tools of our age. This video is reaching you through one. But the body can tell the difference between sitting inside a shared circle and sitting alone in a lit rectangle. Maybe that is why a campfire still feels strangely familiar. Not only pleasant, familiar. Like a room the body recognizes before the mind explains it. The morning fire marks the day without numbering it. Coming toward it means waking has become social. Leaving it means the day is opening outward. Returning to it later will mean something else. Food, story, rest, darkness. A clock tells you what time it is. Fire tells you where you are inside the day. Those are not the same thing. Our person eats a little more, not enough to be full in the modern sense, enough to shift the body from empty to ready. Somewhere between hunger and satisfaction, the morning steadies. There is a small truth here that many of us still recognise. A quiet cup of coffee before the phone, 5 minutes of morning light on the face, a balcony, a porch, a kitchen before anyone else wakes. These are not Paleolithic experiences, of course, but they may be modern shadows of an older transition, the body asking not to be thrown directly into demand. The fire lowers, the air warms, conversation turns practical, the camp begins to loosen into motion, and now comes something that sounds simple, but is not. This person will eat today, but not according to Mealtimes. Here is a strange thought. This person has no breakfast. That does not mean they do not eat in the morning. If food is there, they eat. If the body asks, they answer. But breakfast as a fixed category does not really belong to this world. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. These words assume a day divided by clocks, work periods, school schedules, kitchens, tables, and social expectations. They assume that eating happens at appointed points in time. For most of human history, eating was organised differently, not randomly, differently. You ate when food was available, when hunger mattered, when the group returned with something, when a fruit-heavy branch was found, when roots were dug, when meat had to be shared before it spoiled. When the season offered more, you ate more of that. When it offered less, you adjusted. There was no table waiting at noon, no lunch break, no refrigerator holding tomorrow in place. What this person eats in the morning depends on the land, the season, and yesterday's luck. A few strips of dried or roasted meat, some nuts, berries saved from earlier, a root warmed in ash. If the group is fortunate, perhaps an egg. If they live near water, shellfish. In a different region, honeycomb. In another, a piece of reindeer or a roasted tuber. The variety matters, not as a wellness preference, as a survival strategy. A group dependent on one food source is vulnerable when that source fails. A group that knows dozens of edible plants, animals, insects, shellfish, roots, seeds, and seasonal possibilities has more ways to continue. Modern nutrition has its own language for this now. Diversity, fibre, micronutrients, eating a range of plants. But for people living by foraging, variety was not a slogan. It was ordinary competence. We should still be careful. Hunter-gatherer diets were not one thing. Some groups ate heavily from animal foods. Some relied more on gathered plants. Some coastal communities used marine resources. Tropical, Arctic, desert, forest and river landscapes all produced different menus. There was no single ancestral diet. The better point is not that everyone ate the same way. It is that food knowledge had to be intimate. You needed to know what was edible, what was dangerous, what needed cooking, what could be eaten raw, what only appeared after rain, what ripened for a few days and then vanished, what looked almost identical to something poisonous. How does a child learn that? Not in one lesson, in hundreds of small moments. A mother, an aunt, an older sibling, an elder. Someone pauses beside a plant and says a few words. This one, not that one. Smell the underside. Feel the hair on the stem. Wait until the colour deepens. Do not eat the pale berries. Do not pull the root before the leaves change. Much of this teaching is not formal enough to look like teaching. It happens while walking, gathering, resting, arguing, laughing. The child absorbs the landscape in pieces, and over time the pieces begin to hold together. An anthropologist once walking with an elder in a deeply known landscape might feel something close to astonishment. Every plant named, every stone carrying a use, every bend in the path attached to memory. But for the elder, this is not astonishing. It is normal knowledge. The world is not a backdrop. It is a living archive. If the person dies without passing enough of it on, a library really can burn. Around the morning fire, we can imagine a smaller version of that archive at work. An older woman sits with a young girl beside her. On a strip of bark are several plants gathered earlier. The woman lifts one leaf. "This one is safe," she says, though not in those exact words. "This one is not. See the underside. Smell it. Look again. They grow close together. Do not trust the first glance." The girl looks, touches, smells. Maybe she'll forget the sentence, but she may remember the smell, the slight roughness, the warning in the woman's voice. That is how knowledge enters the body. No notebook, no exam, no certificate, only the difference between nourishment and danger. Nearby, our person cracks nuts between two flat stones. The motion is small but precise. Too little force and the shell holds. Too much and the inside is crushed. The hand has learned the middle. Modern life removes these little negotiations from us. The nut arrives shelled, cleaned, packaged, priced, and ready. That is convenience, and it is not a bad thing. But it hides the chain of knowledge that once stood between hunger and food. In this older morning, even a handful of nuts carries technique. A container near the fire holds dried berries from an earlier season. Concentrated sweetness. A small handful wakes the body quickly. The human attraction to sweetness is not mysterious when you place it back in a world where ripe fruit meant energy, timing, climbing, searching, and luck. Our modern problem is not that the body likes sweetness. The problem is that an ancient attraction now lives inside an environment of refined sugar, endless access, and very little effort. The body kept the old signal. The world changed the supply. Some foods this morning are raw, some have passed through fire. That difference is one of the major turns in the human story. Cooking makes many foods easier to chew and digest. It can soften fibres, gelatinize starches, denature proteins, reduce some toxins, and increase the energy the body can use. Researchers such as Richard Wrangham have argued that cooking played a central role in human evolution, including changes in body, gut, and brain energetics. Not every part of that hypothesis is settled, and the timeline of controlled fire is complicated. But the basic point is strong. Heat changed what food could do for us. A raw wild tuber can be hard work. Warmed slowly near embers, it may become softer, sweeter, and far easier for the body to use. So when this person eats a root left in the ash, they are not simply eating. They're using inherited chemistry. No recipe, no written instruction. Just a practice method passed through repetition. Not in the flame, but beside it. Not burned, softened. Not forgotten, watched. A woman moves ash aside with a stick. A darkened root appears, its skin toughened by heat. She sets it down, blows lightly, waits. Then she breaks it open. A thin thread of steam lifts into the cold morning air. The inside is soft. A child beside her receives a piece. The child is very young, but this moment is already part of their education. Warm, smoky, sweet, held carefully between fingers. Something like a baked potato, though not a potato. Some wild root that does not translate neatly into our language. The taste still lands in memory. Food is not only fuel here, it is knowledge made edible. A valley, a season, a hand, a fire, a warning, a habit. All of it arrives in the mouth. For most of us, food has become consumption more than knowledge. We open a package, lift a lid, wait for the microwave. The knowledge has migrated elsewhere. Farms, factories, supply chains, food science, shipping routes, labels, databases. That has made life safer and easier in countless ways. But it has also created a strange distance. We can eat something without knowing when it grew, where it grew, who touched it, what weather shaped it, or how far it travelled to reach us. In the older world, food was less reliable, but it was more legible. This root from this ground. This meat from yesterday's attempt. These berries from last summer's abundance. No bite was fully anonymous. A modern person eating an apple may be trying to get through to the next task. This person eating a root is also tasting the place where it was found, the person who dug it, the fire that softened it, and the memory of when it grew well before. Same gesture, different layers underneath. This was not a healthier life in any simple sense. It was not cleaner, safer, or easier. Hunger was real, mistakes had consequences. A bad season could press itself into every body in the group. But food connected more directly to the world. That connection is one of the things modern people often try to recover in small ways. A garden, a farmer's market, bread made by hand, fish cooked near the water it came from, fruit eaten in season. Even if we do not say it this way, we seem to know that food feels different when its story has not been completely hidden from us. Around the morning fire, eating winds down without a formal ending. One person finishes, another keeps chewing. A child asks for a little more. Someone wipes ash from their fingers. Conversation has shifted toward the day ahead. A basket is lifted onto a shoulder. A digging stick is picked up. Someone settles with a stone to work. The infant is tied across a mother's back. Children are still moving near the fire, turning the border between play and learning into something impossible to separate. The day has not started all at once. It has gathered. In this world there is no such thing as being late in the way we know it. There is only, we reached that today, or we did not. We found food there, or we did not. The weather changed, so we turned back. The track was old, so we tried another place. This does not make the day free of pressure. It makes the pressure belong to the world rather than the clock. Maybe that is why modern mornings can feel so strangely precious when they are left alone. A quiet cup of coffee, 10 minutes before the phone, light on a wall, the body allowed to arrive before the demands do. These are not ancient experiences, but they may touch something ancient. The camp begins to move outward now. The stomach is full enough. The fire holds. The air is warming. Eyes turn past the shelter, toward the trees, the ridge, the valley floor opening below. Because the camp is not the end of the world, it is only the centre. Beyond it, the land stretches in every direction. And for this person, that land is not scenery. A valley is not just a valley. A river is not just a river. A tree is not just a tree. Each carries a name, a use, a memory, a danger, a season, a story. Those stories are not kept only in the head. They are kept in the feet, in the walking. That is where we go next. The morning has moved on. The sun is above the treetops now. The air has warmed, but it has not yet turned harsh. 4 people are leaving the camp. A woman, her sister, a child of about 11, and an infant. The infant is tied to the woman's back with a strip of hide. The sister carries a digging stick, its tip hardened in fire. The child has a basket woven from reeds over one shoulder. The basket is empty. By evening it will not be. They begin to walk. Their bodies know how to move here, feet bare or wrapped in soft leather, steps uneven because the ground is uneven. A stone is not stepped on if it can be stepped around. A root is not kicked aside if it can be crossed lightly. The walking is conscious without being deliberate, a balance learned so slowly that it no longer feels learned. This is not a walk in the modern sense. They are not heading toward a single destination at a steady pace, eyes fixed on the trail ahead. The walk itself is a way of reading. Every few steps someone stops. A hand touches a leaf. A knee bends toward the dirt. Someone leans close enough to smell a plant or a patch of damp soil. A word may be spoken, or not. Then the movement resumes. To our eyes, much of this would look like nature. Trees, grasses, stones, a forest, a valley. Something beautiful, maybe. Something quiet. But still one large thing covered by one large word. To their eyes, the scene breaks open. The trees have names, which ones fruit and which do not, which ones give sticky resin, which ones make straight wood for a shaft, which ones tend to carry mushrooms near their roots, which ones stand in a hard wind, and which ones are likely to fall in a storm. The grasses have names, which one can soothe a wound, which one can make a person sick, which one dries well for bedding. Even the stones have qualities. This flint will take a cutting edge. This limestone holds water and can matter near shelter. This gravel breaks badly under pressure. What a specialist might spend years trying to catalogue, this woman has absorbed since childhood as part of ordinary life. I always find that humbling. Many of us can walk a trail, admire the view, take a picture, and realise we cannot name almost anything we just passed. Not the plants, not the tracks, not the birds. We saw the landscape, we did not read it. Here, reading is not optional. They have stopped. The sister is bent over the ground, showing the child something on the surface. It is hardly visible. The child kneels, looks, studies whether the mark is long, deep, fresh, or already drying at the edges. Then the child looks up. "Dear," the child says. "Which direction?" The child follows the faint line of marks. 2 steps away, another impression, then another. The ground is not soft. Most people would see nothing. "North," the child says. "When?" Another look. The child studies the edge of the track, the moisture in it, the leaves disturbed around it. A pause. Before dawn. The woman smiles. She does not make a speech. She does not praise the child in any formal way. The smile is enough. Studies of contemporary foraging communities can offer useful clues here, though no living community should be treated as a fossil from the Paleolithic. Across different groups and environments, researchers have documented adults who can distinguish enormous numbers of local plants, animals, tracks, calls, and seasonal signs. This is often described as ecological literacy. It really is a kind of reading. Not letters on a page, but marks in soil, a bend in grass, a change in bird sound, a smell carried by wind. In some ways it is less abstract than reading. In other ways it is harder. The page does not move, the ground does, they continue. Ahead of them, the woman is working from a map that exists nowhere on paper. It is not even fully spoken. It is stored in repeated movement, in years of noticing what appears where and when. That slope in late spring gives a particular route. The east side of that valley has hazelnut trees that fruit toward the beginning of autumn. Near the reeds, where the marsh meets the stream, birds leave eggs if you arrive before the wrong animals do. None of this has been written down. It has passed from mind to foot, from foot to ground, from ground back into the body. Some researchers have compared knowledge systems like this to a kind of memory palace. The phrase should be used carefully, but the image helps. For someone who knows a territory this deeply, a whole landscape can hold memory. A valley is not only a view, it is where someone fell last summer, where an animal was caught, where a child was born, where a storm once came too quickly. A stone is not just a stone. A tree is not just a tree. Each one can pull a memory forward. That is one reason a person living this way would not easily get lost in their own territory. The land is not a blank surface. It keeps speaking if you have learned the language. They stop again. In front of them is a shrub with small dark purple berries. The woman picks them and drops them into the basket. The child picks them too. Every few handfuls, one berry goes directly into the child's mouth. Nobody stops this. This plant is known. Beside it is another shrub, almost identical. Same shape of leaf, same height. The berries are only a little lighter. Eaten in quantity, they would make someone violently sick. The woman points to the second shrub. She touches the leaf, turns it over, holds it near the child's nose. "This is the bad one," she says. "The colour is lighter, the underside is fuzzy. The good one and the bad one grow close together here. Always check." The child nods. Are they memorising it? Maybe. But that word does not quite fit. The child is training perception. One day, passing this shrub alone, they may not think the rule through in words. Their hand will simply choose the right plant, the way the woman's hand does now. Over the years, the child will gather hundreds of lessons like this. Almost none of them will be called lessons. An older sibling might drop a dry leaf onto the ground and ask, "When did this fall?" The child will look at the colour, the brittleness, the curl at the edge. They will get it wrong. The older sibling will laugh and give the answer. Another day, the child will get it right. No certificate, no applause, just the conversation continuing. This is education in one of its oldest forms. No classroom, no test. Attention passed through ordinary life. They keep walking. An hour passes. The basket is more than half full. The woman stops, crouches, and drives the digging stick into soft ground. She twists it, levers the soil, and pulls up a brown knotted root. Then another, then another. These might be roasted later, or crushed into a paste. The decision has not been made. It will be made in the evening, when tired bodies and actual hunger decide what sounds possible. A bird calls sharply. Everyone stops. The woman lifts her head and listens. Then her shoulders soften. "Fox," she says. down by the stream, moving away. Bird alarm calls are almost a second language. One sound for a raptor overhead, another for a territorial quarrel, another for something larger moving along the ground. Her ear has sorted these differences for years. Who taught her? Her mother. Who taught her mother? Another woman before her. The chain goes back further than anyone can trace. It is not only birds. Wind carries information too. A certain movement in the leaves tells you where weather is coming from. A low sound in a particular season may mean a storm is building. Someone who knows this turns back early. Someone who does not may be caught far from camp, wet and cold, with a child and a heavy basket. The walk goes on. The child is slowed. The woman points to a flat stone where they can rest. The child sits. The woman sits too, unties the infant and nurses. Her sister remains standing, scanning the trees and the line of ground ahead. From a modern accounting perspective, this whole morning could look inefficient. Maybe 8 miles walked, maybe 10. A basket of berries, some roots, a few plants, a day's food for a day's effort. Strictly measured, the return seems poor, but the basket is not the only result. The map has been refreshed. A child has learned something. A fox has been located. The berries have been checked. The roots have been confirmed. Last year's knowledge has been tested against this year's ground. The basket is half full of visible things. The rest has no weight. This was the nature of the relationship between people and land. The land was a library. Visiting it was not only about taking something from it. The visit kept the library alive. Because this kind of knowledge has to be practiced. If a group leaves a region for a generation, some of the knowledge of that region begins to go dark. The plants lose their names. Tracks become harder to read. Hillsides turn back into scenery. Knowledge of this kind lives only where it is used. So the person did not simply live on the land. In a sense, the land lived through the person. The relationship ran both ways. For a valley to be known, remembered, and useful, someone had to keep walking it. Without that, it was only a view. With it, it was a library. Researchers often call this place-based knowledge. Modern knowledge is mostly portable. You can open a book anywhere. You can pull data from a server on the other side of the world. Older knowledge did not work that way. The knowledge of a valley lived partly inside the valley itself. To carry it, you had to return. Again and again. The walk starts up. The basket is heavier. The sun is higher. And this movement is not an errand. It is part of how the territory stays known, and how the child slowly becomes someone capable of knowing it. Back at camp, another kind of work is already happening, but it does not look much like work. After the women and the child leave, the camp does not become still. It does not become busy either. A few people remain. A young man sits with a stone braced between his knees, working it with another stone. An older man bends over a piece of animal hide, using a bone tool to pierce an edge and thread it with sinew. 2 women sit nearby, talking as they work. One is weaving reeds into a basket. The other is running her fingers through a child's hair, slowly picking out lice. Children move in and out of the scene. A modern person watching this might have trouble naming what is happening. It does not quite look like work. For us, work usually means going somewhere, arriving at a time, doing a defined task and leaving when the official day ends. 9 to 5, a lunch break, a calendar, work on one side, life on the other. That boundary is one of the strongest structures modern life has built. Here, the boundary is missing. That can sound like freedom. They didn't have to go to work. True, but misleading. Not having to go to work is not the same as not having to work. The work is everywhere. Napping a stone is work. Weaving a basket is work. Softening a hide is work. Teaching a child to track is work. Listening to a bird and knowing what it means is work. Cooking, tending the fire, choosing a clean place for waste, picking grasses for bedding, all of it is work. It just has not been placed inside a separate container called the workday. Some anthropologists have treated this as one of the major structural differences between foraging life and many later forms of life. It does not mean there was no pressure. There was. But the pressure was organised differently. A good part of modern stress comes from the gap between what you are doing and what you feel you should be doing. In this camp, that gap is smaller. What someone is doing is usually very close to what the day actually needs. The young man is napping because a spear point broke yesterday. Another attempt at hunting may happen this afternoon, or tomorrow, or next week. Spare points matter. Someone has to make them, and he can. So he does. The work is skilled. He holds the core stone in one hand and strikes it with a harder hammer stone in the other. Too shallow, and the flake does not travel. Too much force, and the stone shatters. A good strike removes a thin, controlled flake that can later become a finished tool. He has been doing some version of this since he was a child. His hands no longer need to narrate every decision. Nobody has ordered him to do it. Nobody is checking progress. Nobody expects the point to be finished by 10 o'clock. The group needs points. He can make points. He is making them. A simple obligation, real but quiet. This can look like a tremendous amount of freedom. In some ways, it is. But freedom is not the same as absence of consequence. If he stopped contributing for days, people would notice. A hunt with too few good points has worse odds. A failed hunt means less food. Less food affects everyone. Social pressure existed here. It was not always spoken directly, and it may not have looked like punishment at first, but people remembered. When food was shared, when people chose who to travel with, when a task needed reliable hands, memory mattered. So it's not accurate to say there was no obligation. There was no time card, no supervisor, but there was obligation. The older man is working the hide. Fresh hide cannot be used as it is. The inner surface has to be scraped clean of fat and tissue, carefully enough not to tear it and firmly enough to remove what will rot. Then it has to be treated, smoked, stretched, worked, and in some traditions rubbed with the animal's own brain, whose fats help soften the fibres. No one needed the chemistry to understand the result. Generations of trial, mistake, and repetition were enough. A single hide can take days, but the person working it does not do only that for days. He returns to it, works for a while, eats, answers a child's question, joins a conversation, comes back, pulls, scrapes, stretches, stops again. The rhythm is not linear, it rises and falls. Some researchers have described work in many pre-industrial and small-scale settings as more closely aligned with the body's rhythms: effort, pause, talk, return. The point should not be made too neatly. Lives varied, environments varied, hard seasons could be brutal. Still, the 8-hour block of continuous abstract effort is not the deepest human pattern. That makes the question, how many hours did early people work, harder than it looks. Some time allocation studies of foraging communities have suggested that direct subsistence labour, the tasks clearly tied to getting food and maintaining life, can take fewer hours than a modern full-time job. But the comparison is slippery. What counts as work? Does caring for a child count? Does listening for weather count? Does teaching while playing count? Does repairing a tool while talking count? In this life, very little is fully outside work, but that does not mean everything feels like work. The young man sets the finished point on a flat rock. He straightens his back and looks around. This is not exactly a break. It is not exactly the end of a shift. It is simply a natural pause. Maybe he will begin another task in a few minutes. Maybe he will sit for a while and say nothing. Neither option has been scheduled in advance. That kind of open pause is rare now. I think many people recognise it only on vacation, or during a power outage, or in those few strange minutes when the phone is in another room and nothing has rushed in to replace it. But again, this should not become romance. The flexibility had a price. If weather turned, work did not stop. If animals moved, people had to adapt. If illness arrived, there was no clinic waiting. A sprained ankle could change the shape of a life for weeks, and the freedom of the day existed inside strong social constraint. If someone did nothing for 2 days in a row, the camp might not erupt in accusation. But by the fire that evening, something could shift. A silence, a look, a name not chosen when a group formed, a share of food that landed differently, invisible signals. Children learned them early. This was not an easier life. It was a differently paced one. Work, rest, play, talk, and teaching folded into one another, instead of being arranged in separate compartments. Now a child wanders over and crouches near the young man. They look at the finished point, pick it up carefully, and turn it in both hands. One day, they will need to make something like this. Not yet, but watching is where it begins. The child sets the point down, studies the young man for a few more seconds, then bolts away, scooping a handful of dirt and scattering it as the beginning of some private game. The adults barely turn their heads. The camp is used to children moving through it like water. Childhood, in this world, may be one of the hardest things for us to imagine clearly. The child runs. No one calls them back. No one says, "Class is starting." There is no classroom, no schedule, no desk, no grades, no official teacher waiting with a plan for the morning. The child will not pass or fail today. And still, learning is everywhere. By the time this child is treated as nearly adult, they may have absorbed an astonishing range of practical knowledge. How to make and tend fire, how to recognise plants, how to read tracks, how to move through weather, how to watch adults negotiate tension, how to share, how to wait, how to handle tools, how to know when to speak and when not to. That is hard for us to hold in mind, because we often treat education and school as the same thing. No school, we assume, means no education. But the evidence does not fit that assumption. In many documented foraging societies, children learn through watching, play, participation, imitation, and occasional direct instruction. A modern teenager's competence sits in different places: digital systems, reading, formal knowledge, social codes of a different world. Neither child knows everything. Each is trained toward a different environment. The striking thing here is that play and learning are not separate. The child joins a group of other children near the edge of camp. They are throwing small stones at a target, another stone balanced on a log. There are rules, but they are loose. Who can land closest? Does a bounce count? Did that hit or only brush the side? The children argue, adjust, laugh, change the rules, and keep going. Is this only a game? Yes, and not only a game. They are learning distance, weight, aim, patience, how the arm follows the eye, how the body leans before release, how frustration feels when you miss in front of others. No adult has turned this into training. The children have done that themselves, without meaning to. Years later, when some of them stand in a real hunting situation, the arm will know something already. It will not know enough, but it will not be starting from nothing. Anthropologists often call this kind of learning by doing. It is knowledge that enters through repetition before it becomes explanation. Formal schooling can teach some things like this, but most school knowledge travels through words, diagrams, books, screens, and seated attention. In this camp, the balance is almost the reverse. At the edge of camp, a few children are crouched beneath a dead tree. Something is on the ground. A small dead animal, perhaps a weasel. They turn it over. One child holds a small stone flake, likely borrowed or picked up from somewhere nearby, and is trying to cut into the animal clumsily. The others comment, "Try here." "No, not there. Hold it like this." An adult passes, sees what is happening, pauses for a moment, then walks on. This can look startling from a modern urban perspective. In many small-scale societies studied by anthropologists, children are allowed far more room to experiment with tools, fire, dead animals, water, and adult tasks than many industrialized parents would find comfortable. That does not mean nobody's watching. It means the watching is distributed. The group is the safety net. Someone is close enough to intervene if the danger becomes serious, but not so close that every mistake is prevented before it can teach anything. The child trying to cut the dead animal is not being reckless in the way it might first appear. They are practicing a task that will matter later. Better to fail now, when the cost is only a messy cut and some laughter, than later, when incompetence carries real consequences. This is one of the deep differences between protecting a child from danger and teaching a child how danger works. Many older childhoods lean toward the second. Not perfectly, not everywhere, not without risk, but often enough to matter. The wider structure around the child was also different. Children were not raised only by two parents sealed inside a household. Anthropologists sometimes call the broader pattern cooperative child rearing or alloparenting. Care distributed among mothers, fathers, grandparents, older siblings, relatives, and trusted adults who may not be close kin. If a child fell, the nearest adult could pick them up. If a child was hungry, someone with food could share. If a child wanted to learn basket making, they might sit with the best basket maker, not necessarily with a parent. A small girl is doing exactly that now. She sits beside an older woman at the edge of camp. The woman is not her mother, maybe not even close kin. She's simply the person whose hands know baskets best. The girl watches. After a while, the woman hands her a reed. "Try bending this." The girl bends it the wrong way. The older woman laughs softly, turns the child's hands and shows the angle again. The lesson lasts 10 minutes, maybe half an hour. Then the girl becomes restless, stands and runs off. The woman does not call after her. She knows the child will come back another morning. Children also learn from other children. Mixed-age playgroups matter here. A 6-year-old watches an 8-year-old. The 8-year-old watches a 10-year-old. Then the 8-year-old turns around and shows a younger child what they just learned yesterday. Teacher and student are not fixed identities. They move around. Sometimes the direction even reverses. A child spots a track first. A child remembers where a plant grew. A child notices something an adult missed. In a world where correct perception matters, the contribution can be accepted because it is useful, not because it came from the right rank. Back by the dead animal, the children have managed a rough cut. They do not bring it to the adults. They divide the little piece among themselves. They do not go near the fire with it. Apparently they understand that fire belongs to another category of danger. One of them tastes the raw meat, makes a face, and spits it out. The others laugh. It was play. It was experiment. It was learning. The three cannot be separated cleanly. That raises a question worth carrying, though not answering too quickly. Modern education is astonishingly powerful. It can teach mathematics, reading, history, medicine, engineering, languages, entire worlds that no small camp could hold. But it also separates learning from the body for long stretches of time. What do children gain from that? What do they lose? The children scatter. Some drift back toward the adults. A few climb a pile of flat stones at the north end of camp. Then one of them suddenly runs toward the opening in the trees. The group is coming back. 5 figures, spears over their shoulders, walking slowly. They have been gone all day. 5 people come into view. 3 are men, young to middle-aged. 1 is an experienced woman who has spent years tracking in this territory. The 5th is about 14, still more child than adult. All of them are tired, dust on their faces, a scrape along one person's leg, spears across their shoulders. No animal. Today, the hunt failed. That matters, because it cuts against the picture many of us inherited. In illustrated books, museum displays, and television documentaries, prehistoric life is often shown through hunting. A group of men, weapons raised, a charging animal, a dramatic chase, the moment of danger. Those scenes did happen, but they were not the whole life. A successful large-game hunt was important, sometimes enormously important. Meat could bring calories, fat, material, prestige, excitement, and a period of shared abundance. But large-game hunting was uncertain. It could fail often. A group could spend most of a day walking, tracking, waiting, and return with nothing. Studies of contemporary foraging communities, used carefully and not as direct copies of the past, support a more complicated picture. In many groups, gathered foods and smaller, less dramatic sources of food provide a large share of daily nutrition. Plants, roots, nuts, shellfish, insects, small animals, stored foods. The exact proportions depend heavily on environment, season, technology, and culture. So the hunt was not irrelevant, it was just irregular. A large game hunt is costly, hours of walking, long stretches of stillness, careful coordination. If the hunt succeeds, the gain can be transformative. If it fails, the energy is gone. It is high variance work, costly when it fails, generous when it succeeds. This attempt began early. The group walked toward a valley where a deer herd had been seen a few days before. 2 hours. When they arrived, there were tracks, but the tracks were old. The herd had passed through before the previous night. A decision: go back or follow. They followed. For 3 more hours they read the ground. The tracks became fresher. Hope entered quietly. Not celebration, just the small tightening that comes when a guess begins to look right. At the mouth of a smaller valley they saw the herd, 12 or 13 animals, one with its head raised, alert. Then the wind shifted against the hunters. The animals could smell them. This is where the real skill began. Approaching game could require stillness over long stretches, minutes, sometimes longer. The group spread out. 2 moved along one side of the valley behind a low ridge. 2 took another angle. The 5th moved toward what they thought would be the herd's escape path. The plan was simple in shape and difficult in execution. One approach, a startle, a direction of flight, the 5th person waiting where the animals might run. No one explained it aloud. Hand signals, shared experience, years of knowing how the others move. Then came the waiting. Imagine the inside of that stillness. You are crouched in tall grass, bare knees against the ground. An ant climbs your arm. You cannot brush it away. Flies land near your eye. You do not move. One animal raises its head and tests the air. Every muscle in you goes quiet. The animal lowers its head. You breathe again, but smaller. This kind of waiting is hard to find in modern life. A body locked in place while the mind stays completely awake. It is not passivity. It is attention under pressure. The approach began. One hunter moved slowly from one patch of cover to another. The herd held for a moment. Then the lead animal lifted its head and bolted the wrong way. The plan broke in seconds. The herd ran toward the side where the second pair was positioned, not toward the person waiting in the escape path. The second pair had no time to throw. The animals passed through and were gone. After hours of walking, reading, positioning and waiting, the decisive moment lasted perhaps 10 seconds. A change in wind, a nervous animal, a direction nobody could force, and that was the day. Now they have returned to camp tired and quiet. The quiet is not simple defeat. There may be frustration in it. Of course there is. But failure is not a shock. Not in this work. A failed hunt is one possible result of a normal day. Anger will not bring the herd back. Despair will only add weight to the body. So the group comes to the fire. Someone brings food. The fire is built up. Tired bodies warm. After a while, description begins. The wind shifted there. The tracks misled us about the direction. The led animal was already alert. Nobody turns this into a formal review. Nobody needs a meeting. They talk because the day is worth understanding. Each detail becomes part of the next attempt. The hunt mattered. A successful one could change the whole emotional weather of the camp for days. It could feed people, repair tensions, increase someone's standing, and produce stories that would be told many times. But it was still an event, not the rhythm. The rhythm was quieter. Gathering, napping, weaving, tending fire, raising children, telling stories, listening to the land. Much of that work left little trace. The spear point survives in the museum case. The basket usually does not. The hunt gets painted on a wall. The digging stick disappears. What history remembers is often what was dramatic. What sustained life was often ordinary. The hunt was the exception. Life was the rule. And the rule moved in a broader current. Hands and tools, bodies and materials, building and repairing and shaping day after day. We will move closer to that current next. Near the edge of the camp, another kind of work is happening. An animal hide lies flat on the ground. On it, a small pile of stones. A few feet away, a straight branch, a bundle of plant fibres, and a piece of antler, the tine of a deer horn. A man is bent over a stone, turning it in his hands. Beside him rests another stone, heavier and harder. A hammer stone, an archaeologist would call it. He lifts the core toward the light, runs one finger along its edge, stops at a small raised point. Then he sets the stone against a piece of hide draped over his knee, raises the hammer stone and waits for half a breath. Tap. A flake drops onto the hide, not the ground. He puts the hammerstone down, picks up the flake, turns it, studies the edge. A small expression passes across his face, not a grin, more like recognition. He sets the flake aside and repositions the core. Tap. Another flake. From a distance, this can look almost insultingly simple. One stone hitting another. Anyone can imagine doing it. Then you try it. Flint and stones that fracture in similar ways are not obedient materials. Strike at the wrong angle and the flake shatters. Strike too softly and nothing comes away. Strike too hard and the core can split, taking hours of useful work with it. The angle matters. Too flat and the force dies on the surface. Too steep and the stone crushes instead of releasing a clean flake. The target is often a small prepared point on the face of the core, the platform. A good blow sends force through the stone and peels a flake away from beneath the edge. When it comes off well, that flake can be sharper than a steel knife. Modern material science calls this conchoidal fracture, a fracture that moves through stone in a curved shell-like pattern. The man does not know that term. He almost certainly does not think of shock waves or fracture mechanics. His hands know what his words do not need to know. Years of watching, failing, adjusting and trying again have taught his body where the force should go. This is a form of quiet intelligence, not instinct, not guesswork, learned skill, stored in the hand, the eye, the shoulder, the small corrections that happen before a thought has time to become a sentence. A teacher can say, "Strike here." But here is not enough. The hand has to learn what here feels like, how the stone answers, how a promising edge sounds under pressure, how failure looks 1 second before it happens. A child might sit beside a toolmaker for a long time before anyone formally teaches them anything. They watch the angle of the arm, the pause before the strike, the little turn of the core after each flake comes off. Eventually a smaller stone is placed in their hands. The first attempts are bad. The next ones are less bad. After many more, the child begins to feel the difference between a useful strike and a wasted one. No one has to explain all of it. The material is explaining too. I always find this part humbling. So much of modern intelligence is measured by what can be written down, tested or spoken. But here, intelligence lives in a motion that would disappear the moment the hand stops moving. Modern psychology sometimes calls this tacit knowledge, knowledge that cannot be fully reduced to instructions. It lives in practice, in timing, in the nervous system. Much of life before writing depended on this kind of knowledge. The man keeps working. Another flake, another. A small pile begins to form on the hide. Some flakes will be used almost as they are, as cutters, scrapers, borers. Others will become blanks for more refined tools. When the core is finished, it has changed shape completely. Its surface is covered with negative scars, the places where flakes were removed. To an experienced archaeologist, those scars can be read almost like a sequence of gestures. Which flake came first, which came next, where the napper changed direction, where a problem appeared and how it was solved. A stone tool is not only an object, it is a record of decisions. This is why archaeologists classify many stone industries by the logic of their production, not only by the final shape. Mousterian, Aurignacian, Solutrian. These names point to different tool-making traditions, materials and ways of thinking through stone. None of this was static. Stone technology changed, spread, disappeared, returned, and adapted to local landscapes over very long periods of time. There is a history of technology here, even without a single written word. The man sets down the hammerstone and stretches his back. One flake has come away especially well. It will become a point for a spear or a cutting tool. But first it needs shaping. Now the work becomes smaller. He picks up the antler tine. Its tip is hard and smooth. With the stone held in one hand, he presses the antler against the edge and removes tiny chips one by one. Not by striking now, but by pressure. This is pressure flaking, a finer way of shaping an edge. The technique appears in different places and periods across deep prehistory, and in some regions the evidence goes back much earlier than scholars once assumed. But the exact methods varied with stone, purpose, and tradition. From the outside, the movement looks almost peaceful. The man's face is not tense. His hand works at a steady pace. Press, adjust, press again. A chip comes off. The edge gets cleaner. It is not effortless. It is simply practiced enough that the effort no longer has to announce itself. Many people today know a pale version of this feeling. Repairing something by hand, kneading dough, sanding wood, drawing a line again and again until the curve finally sits right. The mind quiets because the body has been invited back into the work. Most modern work does not offer that. A great deal of it happens through screens, chairs and abstractions. We move information more than material. The body waits in the background, underused, while the mind carries the whole day. Older work was different. Not easier, not romantic. but more often built around a continuous feedback loop between body and material. The stone responds, the hand adjusts, a flake falls wrong, the next movement compensates, the body stays in the conversation, the point is nearly finished. The man lifts it into the light and runs a thumb carefully along one edge, a small irregularity. He works it down. Then he sets the piece aside. Still, a point is not yet a spear. It has to be hafted, joined to a wooden shaft, and that requires another chain of knowledge. Across many prehistoric contexts, people learned to make natural adhesives. The materials depended on what was available. Birch tar in some places, pine resin in others, sometimes mixed with charcoal, ochre, plant fibres, beeswax, or fat to change texture and strength. The recipes were not random. Experimental archaeology has shown that some ancient adhesive mixtures could be surprisingly durable. But we should be careful. There was no single Paleolithic glue recipe. Different people, in different places, solved the problem with different materials. How did anyone discover this? Probably not in one grand invention. More likely through countless small observations. Resin softens near heat. Tar hardens as it cools. Charcoal changes texture. A binding holds better if it dries under tension. Some combinations fail, others hold. The useful ones are remembered. Near the fire, the man warms a dark piece of resin until it begins to soften. He mixes in a little powdered charcoal. The point is set into a split at the end of the shaft. The warm adhesive is pressed around the joint. Then dried sinew, animal tendon, tough and flexible, is wrapped tightly around it. As the sinew dries, it will contract, pulling the join even tighter. A few hours of work, a few hundred small decisions, which stone, which shaft, which angle, how much pressure, how much resin, how tight the binding, how long to let it set. None of this came from a manual. None of it was learned in a classroom. It came through a decision tree grown over years, held in bodies and shared across generations. An IQ test would tell us very little about this intelligence. Not because it was lesser or greater, but because it was aimed at different problems. A modern test measures the skills valued by a literate, numerate-administered society. This man's world asked other questions. Can you read stone? Can you repair what breaks? Can you turn a plant, a tendon, a branch, and a flake into a tool that may decide whether the group eats tomorrow? Put him in a modern city, and many of his skills would fail him. Put a modern person alone in his territory and the reverse would happen quickly. Neither fact proves superiority. It only shows that intelligence is not one single thing floating above circumstance. It is trained by the world that needs it. The man picks up the finished spear and stands. For a moment he looks around the camp. Afternoon is fading now. The best place to be is near the centre, where warmth and conversation are beginning to gather again. So he walks toward the fire. Evening is coming. The sun has dropped toward the western ridge. The air cools. The gatherers are back. The hunting group has returned too, empty-handed today, but alive. Children are running through the last bright edge of the day. At the centre of the camp the fire grows. The small flame of the morning has become a wider evening heat. Thicker branches have been added. More people have gathered. Firelight moves across faces. Bright, then shadow, then bright again. For us, sitting around a fire often belongs to special occasions. A vacation, a campsite, a fireplace in winter, something we plan. For this person, fire was not an occasion. It was the centre of ordinary life. It was where food became edible, where wet things dried, where children drifted towards sleep, where tools were repaired, where people could see each other's faces after dark. Some anthropologists have treated fire not only as a survival technology, but as a maker of social space. A fire creates a centre. Around that centre is a radius of warmth and light. People naturally arrange themselves inside it, close enough to feel heat, far enough not to burn, positioned so they can see and be seen. Long before walls, fire made something like a room. No roof, no door, no fixed architecture, but a boundary all the same. Inside, warmth, faces, known voices. Outside, darkness, cold, movement, uncertainty. The threshold was not built from wood or stone. It was drawn by light. That may be why a lit room still feels different from a dark one. Flip on a lamp and a space seems to open. Turn it off and it withdraws. We do this without thinking, but the gesture is old. Around this fire, people settle into places. Some sit directly on the ground, some on hides. Someone pulls a log closer and leans back against it. A child rests their head against an adult's thigh, trying not to fall asleep and failing. The conversation is soft, a few words, a laugh, not loud. The open air takes the edges off the voices. They do not echo. They do not travel far. The fire crackles underneath everything, never silent, never quite intrusive. Anyone who has sat beside a real fire for more than a few minutes knows that it changes the pace of a room, even when there are no walls around it. People look at the flame when they do not know where to look. Silences become easier. Faces seem less guarded. Firelight is not neutral light. It moves. It edits. A tired expression appears, then disappears. A hand gesture becomes large. A glance becomes visible. The face is never still for long. It is easy to understand why evening firelight may have mattered for language and storytelling. During the day, talk has practical weight. Go there, bring that. Look at this track. This plant is wrong. The child is near the stream. At night, when the urgent work loosens, speech can move differently. It can circle back. It can speculate. It can remember. Polyvisna's work with Jew/Hoansi communities is often discussed in this context. Daytime talk tended to stay closer to practical matters, while firelit evening talk opened more space for stories, relationships, imagination, and distant social worlds. We cannot copy that directly onto every Paleolithic camp, but it gives us a useful window. Fire may not have invented language. That would be far too simple, but it gave language a place to stretch. Near the coals, a small child crouches with a thin stick. The tip touches an ember and catches. A tiny flame rises. The child lifts it, watches it live for a few seconds, then die. Again, the stick touches the coals. Again, a small flame. No adult rushes to stop it. This does not mean no one is watching. Someone is always watching, though not in the modern way. The child is learning what catches, what dies, how close is too close. A controlled danger, scaled down to a child's hand. The lesson goes into the body. Across the fire, a woman works a piece of hide. She draws the leather across her teeth to soften it, a technique archaeologists sometimes infer from wear patterns on ancient teeth. While she works, she speaks in short phrases. The woman beside her fills in what she cannot say with her mouth occupied. They might be discussing today's gathering, or a person from another group who visited months ago, or who has been generous, who's been unreliable, who might help if the winter turns bad. This kind of talk can look like gossip from the outside. But in a small group, social information is survival information. Who shares? Who holds back? Who keeps promises? Who loses patience? When a crisis comes, the social map in everyone's head matters. The evening continues in this mixed way. Eating, repairing, cleaning children, talking, watching the fire. No one activity owns the whole scene. As the darkness deepens, the talk begins to slow. Children grow heavier against adult bodies. People shift closer, partly for comfort, partly because warmth is not private here. It is shared. Several bodies together create a small weather system of their own. Modern houses have taught us to think of warmth as an individual setting, a thermostat, a blanket, a room. For most of human history, warmth was often collective. It belonged to bodies gathered close enough to matter. The fire burns lower, but the circle holds. And then, at some point, the voice of the evening changes. Someone begins to speak in a different rhythm. It does not have to be the oldest person. Sometimes it might be an elder, sometimes a traveller, sometimes someone who simply knows how to hold a group with their voice. The shift is small but clear. Conversation becomes something shaped. A story has begun. Today, we often treat stories as entertainment. A film, a novel, a podcast, a video to fill the spare part of the day. For the people around this fire, a story could be entertainment too. But it was also something more practical. It was a way of keeping knowledge alive. There is no writing here, no books, no archive outside the body. Everything the group needs to remember has to live in people. Paths, seasons, plant knowledge, animal behaviour, old conflicts, marriages, debts, warnings, losses. The places where water can be found when a year turns dry. A list does not survive well in memory. A story does. A flat instruction might say, in early autumn, on the western slope below the ridge, a certain route can be dug if the usual places fail. Useful information, easy to forget. Wrap that same knowledge in a story, and it changes. There was a dry year, the story says. The familiar places gave nothing. Someone went west below the ridge, ashamed to come back empty-handed. There, where the morning sun hit the slope, they found the route that saved the group. This is why we do not forget that valley. Now the information has a person inside it, a place, a fear, a consequence. The brain holds it differently. Researchers who study oral traditions have found that stories can sometimes preserve memories of real environmental events across striking spans of time. Some Aboriginal Australian traditions, for example, describe coastal changes and rising seas that researchers have argued may preserve memories of events more than 7,000 years old. These claims require care, and every story has to be considered in its own cultural context. But the larger point is powerful. Collective memory, repeated and performed, can reach far beyond the memory of any one person. That asks us to think differently about remembering. Most of us forget why we walked into a room, but a community that practices memory together, through repetition, song, ritual, place, and story, is not relying on one private mind. Memory is distributed. It lives between people. At the fire, the storyteller's first lines have changed the room. Children stop moving. Someone who was half asleep opens their eyes. People who know the story already listen anyway, because knowing what happens is not the same as hearing it arrive again. The story might be about a hunt, or a journey made before anyone now living was born, or a spirit, an ancestor, a figure who belongs partly to history and partly to meaning. These categories were not always separated the way we separate them now. A story could describe a real place and still carry spiritual force. It could teach a practical rule without becoming a lecture. The voice has shape. Some phrases repeat. Some moments slow down. Others pass quickly. This rhythm is not decoration. It helps memory hold. In many oral traditions, story sits close to song. The melody may be slight. The cadence may be enough. But rhythm gives memory a spine. As the story moves, the listeners move with it. Faces change. Breathing settles. Attention narrows around one voice. For a while, the group becomes one listening body. The storyteller brings a character to a decision. Even those who know the ending wait. The waiting matters. the return matters. A story is not only information to extract, it is a place the group visits together. A child on someone's lap has nearly fallen asleep. Their eyes are closed, but the voice is still entering. Years from now, that child may tell the same story, not word for word. A detail may shift, a turn of phrase may change, but the core will remain, because the group knows the shape of it. In an oral culture, a story is not owned in the modern sense. There is no fixed edition, no title page, no single final version. The person telling it carries it for a while, alters it within limits, and gives it back. That does not mean anything goes. Groups know when a story has been changed too much, told poorly, or used in the wrong setting. Oral tradition is flexible, not shapeless. The story nears its end. The storyteller's voice lowers, a final image, a final line. Maybe an ending that leaves one thread open, because good stories rarely close every door. Silence follows for a few seconds. Then someone makes a soft comment. Another person adds a memory. The evening resumes, but at a lower pitch. Something has passed through the group and changed the temperature of the night. Our stories now travel farther than any firelit story could. A single narrative can reach millions of people in hours. That is one of the wonders of the present. But often it arrives without a circle around it. One listener alone with a screen. No shared breath. No one checks the time. Time is not working that way here. The firelight reaches only so far. Beyond its edge, the dark opens, and in that dark, the stars are out. If you have lived mostly under city light, a truly dark sky can feel almost unreal the first time you see it. Not a few stars, not the polite scatter visible above a parking lot. Thousands. The Milky Way as a pale, crowded band across the whole sky. Some stars redder, some blue-white. The longer you look, the more the darkness fills with structure. This person did not travel somewhere special to see that sky. It was overhead every clear night. Ordinary in the strictest sense, but ordinary does not mean empty of feeling. The sky was not decoration. It was part of the world people had to read. Stars change with the seasons. The moon changes night by night. Certain patterns rise at particular times of year and disappear at others. People living under open skies almost certainly noticed these recurrences, though what they made of them varied enormously by region, culture, and period. A star pattern might be linked to a plant ripening, a moon phase to a movement of animals or tides, a seasonal sky to a time for travel, caution, or gathering. Not astronomy in the modern sense, no telescope, no written equations, no separation between observation, story, and ritual, but careful attention all the same. Some archaeologists have proposed that markings in caves or on portable objects may record lunar cycles, seasonal signs, or sky observations. These interpretations are debated and caution is necessary. But the idea is not random. If the sky helped organise time, people had reason to remember it, mark it, and attach it to story. Someone near the fire points upward and says a name, not Orion, not the bear, a name in this group's own language, maybe a travelling animal, maybe an ancestor path, maybe a set of sisters, a hunter, a warning, a place that had moved into the sky. We do not need to know the exact name to understand the function. A cluster of stars becomes easier to remember when it has a story. A recurrence becomes easier to track when it has a character. Myth and observation are not always opposites. Sometimes myth is how observation survives. Imagine a particular cluster rising near the same season when fish begin to run in a nearby river. Over generations, the connection becomes reliable enough to matter. The cluster receives a name. The name enters a story. The story reminds the group when to move toward the river. No calendar on a wall, No date on a screen. The sky keeps the schedule. People learn how to read it. A streak crosses the dark, fast, bright, gone almost before the eye can follow it. Someone says something. A few people laugh softly or answer. Across many cultures, meteors and unusual sky events have gathered meaning. What this group would say about one, we cannot know. But it is hard to imagine that a sudden fire in the sky would pass without notice. When the moon is full, the ground changes. Night travel becomes easier. Faces are visible at distance. When the moon is new, the sky deepens and the stars come forward. Different nights offer different kinds of knowledge. A modern astronomer knows things this person could not have imagined. Stellar distances, galaxies, the age of the universe, the chemical lives of stars. That knowledge is vast, precise, and astonishing. But it is not the only kind of sky knowledge. The person by the fire might know which star rising over which ridge belongs to a coming cold, or which moonlight is good enough for moving, or when the sky says a certain plant is close. That knowledge is smaller in scale, but it is attached to life. Two ways of knowing. One reaches outward across space and time. One folds the sky into the decisions of a day. Neither replaces the other. The conversation around the fire has nearly stopped. A few people are simply looking up. Someone pulls a hide around their shoulders. A child has slid sideways off a parent's lap, half awake and half gone. The fire settles lower. The sky goes on with its slow movement. Stars lifting and setting. The moon, if it has risen, climbing the edge of the horizon. 30,000 years of human change barely troubles that motion. This is one of the quieter shocks of looking back. The same sky is still there. Not the same atmosphere, not the same light pollution, not the same names, but the same turning, the same moon, many of the same stars. We're under it too. Most of us have simply stopped using it as part of ordinary life. That does not have to be framed only as loss. Roofs kept out rain. Walls held warmth. Electric light made reading, surgery, safety, and long winter evenings possible. These are not small gifts. But the exchange changed the place of the sky. It moved from being the ceiling of daily life to being something we have to remember to go outside and see. "I should look at the stars tonight" is a sentence that only makes sense after the sky has stopped being automatic. For this person, no such sentence was needed. The sky was already there. The night deepens. The fire lowers to a steady red. But life has not quite stopped. For this person, night is not a clean cut into sleep. Night has its own kind of wakefulness. We will see that next. Night has fully arrived. The fire has lost its height. The bright flames have pulled down into something lower, denser, redder. Heat held close to the coals. A thin skin of ash covers the surface. Now and then, a piece still alive inside cracks. A spark rises, pauses in the dark for less than a second, and disappears. Around the camp, the familiar world has gone missing. The valley, the trees, the stones, the paths, the plant clusters, the slope down to the water. Everything that could be read in daylight has merged into one dark mass. During the day, the land was a library. At night, it has closed its covers, but it has not fallen silent. It is speaking in another language. By day, the eyes read. At night, the ears do. A crackle from the coals, a brief, uneasy bird call, wind moving through the valley like a breath with no body behind it, a small branch popping in the heat, a sleeping child making a muffled sound, an adult shifting on hide, the soft scrape of skin and leather in the dark. Each sound is small. Each sound could matter. For a modern person, night is usually something held at a distance. We have lamps, streetlights, Phone screens, curtains, locks, windows, weather apps, alarms. We have not erased the night exactly. We have surrounded it with tools. For this person, night still has its own presence. Darkness is not just the absence of light. It moves. It holds animals, wind, distance, uncertainty. It changes the shape of things. A tree trunk becomes a body. A path that was obvious at noon disappears after 3 steps. Space itself feels less reliable. So night is not a time to surrender completely. Most of the camp is lying down now. The children went first. Some are tucked close to mothers or older siblings. Some are pressed together in small clusters. Bodies are calling back the energy spent during the day. The gatherer's legs ache. The toolmaker's hands still carry a faint tremor from hours of stonework. The woman who worked hide all afternoon feels it in her jaw. The hunting group carries the quiet weight of a day that brought nothing back. Still, no one vanishes all at once. A little outside the fire's strongest warmth, someone may still be sitting. An older man, a young woman, a person who has always returned slowly to sleep. Eyes not fully open, not fully closed. Body loose, ears turned outward. Within reach, a branch for the fire. Nearby, a spear. Perhaps not because it will be used, but because knowing it is there changes the body. This may not have been a formal watch system. Perhaps no one said, "You take the first part of the night, then I will." In some camps, some version of that may have existed. In others, probably not. The evidence does not let us reconstruct every night in every place. But small groups have needs. Children wake, babies cry, elders surface from pain, fires drop low, cold enters, animals move. A strange sound can pull more than one sleeper toward awareness, so rest, in this older night, was probably more porous than ours. Some of it was deep, some of it stayed near the surface, some of it belonged to dreams, some of it belonged to listening. That matters, because safety did not depend only on walls or weapons. It depended on bodies tuned to one another. If one person did not hear something, another might. If a child stirred, the adult beside them would register it. In some later groups, where dogs or dog-like companions were present, an animal might stir first. In other times and places, human hearing did the work alone. The alarm did not shout, it opened. Just past the fire's edge, the dark is not empty. As the eyes adjust, parts of the world return. The last ring of firelight, the edge of a stone, the outline of a tree trunk, a basket on the ground, the curve of a sleeping body on hide. Beyond that ring, everything softens. The ring matters. Firelight does more than reveal. It draws a border. Inside and outside, the human side and the night side. Inside, faces. Outside, sounds. Inside, names. Outside, possibilities. Some version of this division appears almost everywhere humans make homes. House and street, village and forest, room and hallway, campsite and woods. Fire may be one of the oldest ways that boundary was felt. A sound comes from beyond the ring. It could be a hyena, a wolf, a large cat, or only a deer moving through brush. Night enlarges things. A small snap in darkness can become, in the mind, a much larger body. Fear enters, but not necessarily as panic, more like a sharpening. In this life, fear was not automatically a malfunction. It was information. Too much could freeze a person, but the right amount could make the ear keener, the breath smaller, the body ready. Modern fear often moves differently. Many of us are protected from immediate physical danger, but we absorb distant threats through screens. News from across the world arrives in the nervous system as if it were at the door. We worry over abstract shapes, money, status, health, time, future, messages unanswered. This older fear was more local. Is that sound near? Will this wind bring rain? Does that smell belong to an animal? Who is closest to the child by the fire? Fear was tied to the world within reach. The watcher lifts their head, listens. The sound does not repeat. Whatever it was, it has moved on, or was never dangerous at all. After a while, the branch goes onto the coals. They flare. For a moment, faces appear in red light, then fall back into shadow. In that brief illumination, the whole small world is visible. Bodies close together, tools on the ground, baskets, a strip of worked hide, a half-eaten root, a small stone still held in a child's hand. Everything gathered through the day has come together in the dark, a small world held inside a much larger one. Sometime near the middle of the night, someone else surfaces. A dream may have pulled them up, or the cold, or the body may simply have risen toward wakefulness for a little while, as bodies sometimes do when sleep is not sealed away from the world. They speak to the person beside them in a low voice. The wind shifted. Feed the fire. The child is cold. Or something more private. A small resentment. A worry. A memory that did not find space during the busier hours of the day. The middle of the night opens a different kind of talking. Daytime speech carries work. Come here. Look at that. This route is right. That track is old. The child is near the water. Watch the fire. Evening speech opens into story and social knowledge, but deep night speech is smaller, closer to the inside of a person. In darkness, voices shrink, sentences shrink with them. Two people might talk about where to move tomorrow. An elder might remember a bad winter in another valley. Someone might think of a person who died. There is no reason to imagine grief was absent from this life. Burials with objects, careful body placement, and traces of ochre suggest that death was not treated as a purely biological event in many prehistoric contexts. It left a mark. It opened a space. That space could be carried at the fire, in the dark, inside a story, or in the way a name was spoken after someone was gone. Night Watch, then, was not only watching outward, it was holding the inside of the group as well, its fears, its memories, its small plans for tomorrow. The breath of an elder who might not wake much longer. The warmth of children who would rise again with the light. The dark moves on. At some point, if the air is clear, the sky sharpens. The Milky Way widens overhead, dense and pale. Not a faint suggestion, but a visible river. Stars appear with a clarity most of us rarely see now. Some bright, some barely there, all of them seeming to hold their places while the earth turns beneath them. For this person, that ski is not rare. It is not a special trip. It is not something to schedule. It is simply there. Ordinary does not mean unfelt. Someone near the fire looks up. The sky's familiar in the way the ground is familiar. Some patterns shift with the season. The moon changes its face. The appearance of a star or cluster may connect in memory with weather, animal movement, plant ripening, or the approach of cold. Not everywhere in the same way, not under one universal system. But across human life, sky-watching and seasonal attention have often belonged together. Night watch is also a keeping of time. You listen to the ground and watch the sky. You wait for animals and for weather. You guard the fire and read the season. Here, the idea from the beginning returns. Civilization did not only change where people lived, it changed the rhythm by which life was held. This older night was layered. It moved between fear and safety, sleep and alertness, the single body and the group body. No one owned the night. Everyone passed through it together. Our nights are different. Most of us entered darkness inside sealed rooms, under artificial light, alone or in small households. What we know about outside usually comes through intermediaries. A weather app, a security camera, a message, a headline. We still listen for the night in a way, but often through devices. That is not simply worse. The modern night is far safer for most people, warmer, more protected. Infants and children survive at rates that would have seemed impossible for much of human history. Infection is no longer an automatic death sentence. A locked door is not a small invention. But something did shift. The language of darkness grew quieter. The fire's centre disappeared. The group's shared breath dispersed. Night became a private closing more than a collective passage. The watcher by the old fire would not have known any of this. For them, night was only night, a world cooling around a small circle of heat. Life moving outside, bodies waiting inside. Hours pass. The fire lowers again. The watcher finally lies down. Someone else may wake briefly, or no one does. The coals may hold until morning. The dark will begin to thin. A grey line will return in the east, and the day will be complete. No alarm, no calendar, no clock, but a day with a beginning, a middle, and an end. A day moving from light to fire, from land to story, from sky to darkness and back toward light again. Now we can step back from that day and ask the larger question. If human life flowed within rhythms like these for so much of our species' history, what did civilization actually change? Civilization did not arrive in a single moment. It is easy to imagine it that way. One day, people in temporary camps. The next, a city gate. The half-circle around the fire suddenly replaced by houses, fields, granaries, temples, markets, and writing. That is not how it happened. The change was slower, messier, and uneven. It happened in different places at different times, in different forms. Some groups moved toward farming. Others remained foragers for a long time. Some combined cultivation, hunting, gathering, herding, fishing, and seasonal movement in ways that do not fit neat categories. Humanity didn't pass through one doorway. It crossed many thresholds. Still, from enough distance, certain shifts become visible. The first was time. Foragers tracked seasons closely. Which fruit ripens when, which animals move where, which rivers flood, which winds arrive before cold. None of this began with farming, but agriculture changed the stakes of timing. There was a time to prepare soil, a time to plant, a time to water, a time to weed, a time to harvest, a time to store. A seed planted too late could mean hunger months later. A harvest taken at the wrong moment could damage the food of an entire year. Time moved from something lived in to something more carefully managed. Calendars became more important. The moon's cycle, the sun's arc, the seasonal rising of certain stars, all of these could be watched with new pressure. The sky remained powerful and meaningful. It also became part of agricultural planning. When do we plant? When do we cut? When will the river rise? The people in the older day also read the sky, but a farmer read it under a different kind of consequence. A mistake was not only a hungry day, it could become a hungry year. The second shift was settlement. Foraging life was not always constant movement. Some groups stayed in rich places for long stretches, moving with seasons rather than wandering randomly. But farming and storage tied people to specific ground more firmly. Houses lasted longer. Fields became associated with particular households or lineages. Granaries appeared, boundaries hardened, and once a boundary exists, a new question appears. Whose is this? A basket of berries pushes towards sharing. Fruit spoils, meat is heavy. A large kill becomes valuable partly because it can be turned into relationship. Grain is different. Grain can be dried, stored, counted, guarded, taxed, inherited, stolen. Storable food can become storable power. Who controls the granary? Who distributes from it? Who counts what goes in and what comes out? Who has enough to survive a bad season? And who has to ask? It would be too simple to say hierarchy was born with agriculture. Human social life had inequalities and power long before cities, but farming and storage gave hierarchy a stable place to grow. Some people accumulated more. Some people worked under the direction of others. Some labour became organised not only around shared need, but around obligation to households, rulers, temples, or states. The rhythm of the body changed too. Work that had been distributed across walking, gathering, climbing, carrying, listening, tracking, repairing and talking became for many people more repetitive. Preparing soil, irrigating, clearing weeds, harvesting, grinding grain, carrying loads, storing surplus. These were not small tasks. They could be brutally hard. And they often asked the body to repeat the same motion again and again. In skeletal remains from early farming populations in many regions, archaeologists have found signs that the transition carried physical costs, reduced average stature in some populations, increased dental disease, joint stress, and narrower diets. Not everywhere, not all at once, and not in one simple pattern, but often enough to matter. This does not mean agriculture was a mistake. Without it, much of what came later would not exist. Cities, written archives, large-scale engineering, universities, hospitals, telescopes, recorded law, long-distance science. The gains were real, staggering even. But gains are not free of rearrangement. Civilization made people more secure in some ways, and more dependent in others. A foraging group, when resources thinned in one place, could often move, not easily, not without risk. But movement remained possible. A farmer could not lift the farm and carry it away. Fields, houses, animals, neighbours, stored food, debts, boundaries, all of these held people in place. A modern North American viewer might recognise a distant version of this. A mortgage, a lease, a school district, a commute, a job market, a tank of gas, a grocery store 20 minutes away. Different world, different scale. But the old question remains. We stay here because our lives are organised around this place. The third shift was food. Agriculture fed more people, far more. Populations grew, villages became towns, towns became cities. But in many places the menu narrowed around a few staple crops: wheat, barley, rice, corn, millet, potatoes in later contexts. Extraordinary plants, civilization-making plants. But reliance has a cost. A forager's year might include dozens or even hundreds of species depending on the environment. Roots, fruits, seeds, nuts, greens, insects, shellfish, fish, birds, small animals, large animals when luck and skill allowed. An early farmer's year could depend heavily on the success of a few crops. A good harvest meant relief. A bad one could mean famine. Modern supermarket aisles seem to solve this at first glance. Thousands of products, fruit from every season, food from the other side of the world, bright packaging, endless choice. And yet abundance can hide knowledge. We can read labels. But many of us do not know the soil, the season, the weather, the hands, the distance, the number of transfers between field and mouth. The older food was less reliable, but it was more legible. Ours is safer and more abundant looking, but often anonymous. The fourth shift was community. In a small foraging group, everyone knew everyone. This could be comforting, but not always. Small groups carry intense social pressure. Privacy is limited. A disagreement can change the whole atmosphere of camp. A person's generosity, anger, skill, laziness, grief, all of it is seen and remembered, but visibility is high. When a child cries, many ears hear it. When an elder struggles, many eyes notice. When someone stops contributing, the group knows. When someone grieves, the absence is not carried alone. Civilization made human worlds larger. Sometimes that meant freedom. A person could become less trapped by the judgment of a small group. A stranger could start again. Privacy could exist. New identities could form. But larger worlds can also make people less visible. In a city, you can pass thousands of faces and still not be known by anyone. You can live a few feet from another household and never know how they woke this morning, what they have lost, whether they are tired, which sound they miss. The old life offered little privacy. The modern one offers less guarantee of being known. Which is better? The question is too simple. Each arrangement carries gifts. Each carries costs. Civilization gave us extraordinary things. Longer lives, far lower childhood mortality, writing, medicine, recorded music, mathematics, long-distance travel, the ability to communicate across continents, the ability to look at a fragment of bone from 30,000 years ago and reconstruct part of the life around it. That too is civilization. But civilization also moved rhythm outward. Rhythm that once lived in hunger, fire, light, walking, weather, season, and the voices of others moved into calendars, shifts, bells, meeting links, payment dates, delivery windows, deadlines, alarms. Time did not disappear from the body, but it was increasingly governed from outside it. Writing belongs to this shift. In many of the earliest writing systems we know, the first marks were not mainly poems or philosophy. They were records, goods, quantities, names, deliveries, offerings, accounts, obligations. Clay held what a larger society could no longer trust only to living memory. Memory moved outward, onto clay, into marks, into lists, into accounts. This was a miracle. A person could die, and a record could remain. A law, a name, a debt, a prayer. A story could survive beyond the voice that carried it. Writing made memory more durable against time. It also changed the texture of remembering. In an oral culture, a story lives each time it is told. The narrator's voice, the listener's face, the firelight, the mood of that evening, all of it enters the telling. Writing fixes a thing. That is its power. A fixed record can cross time with astonishing strength, but it can also drift from the living situation that once held it. Today, external memory has become nearly limitless. Photos, notes, calendars, message archives, maps, cloud storage, search engines. We retrieve more than we remember. We store more than we carry. This is freedom. It is also a change in the body. Some older capacities soften when they are not needed every day, navigating by sense and landmark, reading weather from physical signs, carrying a story because you've heard it so many times that it lives in you, knowing hunger as part of a day's rhythm instead of as an interruption between scheduled meals. I think this is one reason modern life can feel strangely disorienting, even when it is full of information. Knowledge is everywhere, but place can feel thin. The calendar is full, but the day itself may have no shape. Connection is constant, but contact can remain shallow. Large societies need external coordination. Planes cannot depart by intuition. Hospitals cannot open when the sun feels right. Power grids cannot run on bodily rhythm. A city cannot operate by saying, "Come when you wake naturally." Modern life needs clocks, but the human body inside all that precision can lose some of its softness. We eat because the lunch break arrived. We wake because the alarm sounded. We stay inside because the meeting is scheduled. We answer messages because the system is waiting. We turn the light on when the dark might be asking us to slow down. None of this is dramatic in isolation. It is just modern life, but repeated thousands of times, it thins the old conversation between the body and the world. Looking closely at one ordinary day from 30,000 years ago is not an exercise in nostalgia. It is a way of seeing how specific our present arrangement is. Morning alarm, coffee, work, screen, errand, message, exhaustion, artificial light, repeat. That pattern feels normal because we live inside it, but in the scale of human life, it is very new. Underneath it, something older has been running for a long time. The walking body, the group around the fire, the ear that listened to darkness, the memory that held a season, the hand that knew food, the eye that read the sky as time. Civilization did not erase these, it covered them. Which leaves one final question. If the older rhythm was never fully extinguished, where does it still live? Morning comes again, the same camp, the same valley, the same cold stone, a few coals still alive under ash. In the east the sky moves from black to deep blue, then toward grey. One bird begins, then another. The air fills slowly with the small sounds of living things returning. Our ordinary person opens their eyes. Another day. From here, that morning feels distant. 30,000 years ago. Before writing, before cities, before the official beginning of history as we usually tell it. But the body does not measure distance the way a timeline does. Between that person's morning and ours, the technological gap is almost impossible to overstate. But in the nervous system, there is still a kind of kinship. They responded to light. So do we. They sought warmth. So do we. They found reassurance in familiar voices and familiar sounds. So do we. They wanted to know, in a direct way, where food came from. Some part of us still does. They looked for a centre in the dark. So do we. That may be why certain ordinary experiences still carry more weight than they seem to deserve. Sitting around a fire, watching first light touch a room, walking without a phone, making something with your hands, smelling soil after rain, feeling the air change before weather turns, listening to someone's face without a screen between you, knowing something about where a meal came from, looking up at the sky without needing to make anything of it. These can look like luxuries. They may not be luxuries at all. They may be small openings where very old needs still find air. This does not mean we should go back. It matters to say that clearly. The older life was not an ideal. It was dangerous, uncertain, and capable of real cruelty. Children died. Wounds infected. Winters frightened people. Hunger was concrete. A toothache could drain a person for weeks. Anyone who dismisses modern medicine, heating, clean water, antibiotics, eyeglasses, childbirth care, emergency rooms, and safe roads in the name of the past is not understanding the past. They are decorating it. But the opposite mistake is to imagine that old life has nothing but misery. Inside, it was a tempo the human body had inhabited for a very long time. A more direct contact with weather, food, effort, risk, warmth, story, and other people. A shorter distance between what was being done and why it mattered. Food, time, fire, body, group, land, and memory had not yet been pulled so far apart. One of the stranger achievements of modern life is how normal these separations now feel. Food moves away from soil and into packaging. Time moves away from sky and into screens. Work moves away from the body and into the chair. Story moves away from the circle and into the algorithm. Night moves away from darkness and fills with light. Rest moves away from need and searches for an opening in the calendar. These separations made life easier in countless ways. They also thinned certain relationships. That may be why people talk so often about returning to something natural. Natural food, natural light, natural movement, natural rhythm. But natural is a slippery word. It can mean almost anything. A better question might be, which relationships have we lost contact with? A relationship with light, with soil, with where food comes from, with our hands, with darkness, with each other's faces, with the slow signals of the body. We cannot fully recover those relationships. We may not need to, but we can notice them again in small ways. A few minutes of morning light, a meal eaten a little more slowly, a walk where the point is not only distance or steps but attention. Lower lights in the evening, a repaired object, the name of a plant learned and remembered, a child playing, seen not as wasted time but as learning, the sky treated for a moment as an old clock rather than decoration, a viewer in a North American city apartment, a suburban house, a Canadian winter evening, a desert town in Arizona, a long road outside a grocery store. None of these places is a Paleolithic camp. The worlds are not the same, but some of the body's questions still rhyme. Did I see enough real light today? Did I hear another person without rushing to answer? Did my body move, or was it only transported? Did anything I ate feel connected to the world it came from? Did I let the dark change the pace of the evening, or did I fight it until I was exhausted? These are small questions. They do not overthrow modern life. They do not solve loneliness, stress, or the strange pace of the present. But they send small signals to the body. I remember. I have not completely lost the thread. The point is not nostalgia. It is scale. A chance to see our lives not only through the habits of the last few years or the last few generations, but as the newest chapter of a much longer human story. From that angle, some of our restlessness becomes easier to understand. It may be that nothing is broken in us. It may be that we are very old bodies trying to find our footing in a very new arrangement. A story like this can be useful for that reason, not because it lets us escape into the past, not because it rejects the present, but because it makes the present feel less inevitable. It reminds us that the way we live now is not the only way humans have ever lived. Inside us, there is still the person before the field, before the city, before electricity, before writing. The person who looked into a fire, listened for a sound, smelled the morning air, and showed a child the underside of a leaf. That person did not disappear. They grew quieter under the noise. We feel them sometimes, on a mountain trail, at the edge of water, along a forest road in Canada, in a dry desert evening in Arizona, on a fire escape in New York, looking at one small rectangle of sky between buildings. The place changes, the feeling does not. For a moment, time opens, the to-do list moves back, the body settles into its surroundings. A person remembers, briefly and without needing to say it, that they are a living thing. The lost rhythm may not be entirely lost. What may be lost is the habit of noticing it. So let us return one last time to that old day. The sun has risen. The camp is stirring. The person who kept watch is getting up later than the rest. Children move small things around near the fire. A woman checks the cord on a basket. A man tests yesterday's spear point with his thumb. An elder has stepped outside to smell the air. The wind is different today. From the north, maybe. Rain might come. No one treats this as a remarkable moment. That may be the point. This day will enter no record. No one will write it down. No cave wall will hold this morning. We will not know these people's names. Who laughed? Who was tired? Who showed a child which leaf to pick? Who put the last branch on the fire in the middle of the night? None of it will be archived. And yet humanity was built in large part out of days like this. Ordinary days, repeated work, small attentions, shared food, kept coals, told stories, sounds listened to in the dark, light beginning again in the morning. History tends to remember kings, wars, inventions, migrations, catastrophes. But the real weight of human life has often lived in smaller things. A child learning the right plant, a fire not going out, a group eating after a failed hunt, an elder telling a story one more time, someone staying awake so others can rest. Civilization was built on top of all of this. So when we feel misplaced inside the modern world, what we need may not be a cave or a forest camp or any specific version of a life lived 30,000 years ago. Maybe what we need to return to is attention. Attention to how the morning arrives, to where food comes from, to another person's voice, to when the body is tired, to how darkness changes a room, to the fact that a day is not only a slot of time to fill, but a rhythm to move through. A clock can measure time, it cannot measure how we inhabit it. That is measured by something older: breath, light, hunger, warmth, closeness, story, fire. One day, a very long time ago, a person woke in the morning, came to the fire, ate something, walked through the land, showed a child a track, repaired a tool, listened to a story, looked at the sky, heard a sound in the dark, put one more branch on the coals, then slowly went back to sleep. It was not a remarkable day. That is exactly why it mattered. Humanity did not form only in extraordinary moments, it formed in ordinary ones, repeated past counting. We still live inside ordinary days, only the materials have changed. Screens where there was fire, streets where there was valley, shopping bags where there were baskets, calendar alerts where there were stars. Still, under all of it, the body hums an older song. Sometimes to hear it you only need to slow down a little, in morning light, on a walk, at a meal, in a silence, at the end of a story. And now, as this one closes, we have not fully understood that old person. We cannot claim that. Too much time stands between us. Too much is lost. Too many gaps remain. But maybe we have come a little closer, not to a cartoon, not to a wild thing, not to a diminished human, to a relative, someone who lived under the same sky, woke to the same morning light, searched for the same warmth, and listened to the same dark. That may be enough. The past does not always give us answers. Sometimes it leaves us with better questions. How did we live? What did we gain? What did we lose? And inside us, what older rhythm is still running? The fire is low, the sky is opening, the day is beginning again, and we return to our own time. If this journey stayed with you, you can leave a quiet note below where you listened from, or which part of this older rhythm you still feel in your own life.